Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia, the All Authors podcast. Today, we're really thrilled to have our good friend Lance Slatton joining us. He is the founder and owner and director and everything at All Home Care Matters, a home care agency based in Southeast Michigan. Is that right, Lance?
Close enough.
Good enough. Okay. So Lance has been on the show before. You may recognize him as the podcaster at All Home Care Matters. And he is also the author of the All Home Care Matters official family caregiver guide. So he has both a book and a podcast. And today he's joining us for a special episode to tell us about his recent trip to Washington, D.C., when he attended the Elizabeth Dole Foundation's annual convening, and I'll let him explain to you what all of that is about. But it is sounds like a wonderful organization for caregivers, and so we want to make sure that you know about the resources they offer. So, welcome, Lance. Welcome back to the podcast.
Always a pleasure, Marianne, and always good to see you. Yeah, so as you mentioned, we in April we were contacted by the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, which is a tremendous nonprofit organization doing tremendous work for military families and their caregivers and veterans. And but they also focus on caregivers as a whole. And they invited us to come cover their 10th annual convening in DC. And so we loaded up the camera crew and myself and my family actually joined us on the trip. So they got to do the fun stuff while we were at the event. And we were there for about 4 days. And, it was remarkable because I knew of the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, but if I had to take a test, I probably would have failed if you asked me what all it is they do because there's so much. They have a program called Hidden Helpers, which is something they're really focused on, and that's for children caregivers, something that's often overlooked. They have hidden heroes, and then they have their class of Dole Fellows every year. There are caregivers out there. They submit an application, it's reviewed, and they get selected to represent their state as a Elizabeth Dole Fellow. And they go to Capitol Hill, they talk to their congressman, their senator, and they try to advocate and implement policy changes not only for veterans who need care, but also for caregivers as a whole. And it was just a remarkable, remarkable event. When I did secure that we were going to be going, because there was a lot of, work that had to be done on our end to step away for that long. I contacted several people that, I'm sure you know, and that a lot of your listeners and viewers know. And Denise Brown, who's just doing
Mhm.
remarkable work in the caregiving space, has been doing it for just many, many years. Malika Moore, who I know you know very well, she's the founder of Aging and Amazing. And then another person, her name is Cheryl Beversdorf, and she was actually a Vietnam veteran nurse turned podcaster. And, I've gotten to know Cheryl just really well and just a remarkable person in her own right. And so I told these guys, I said, this is something you really need to come and attend. There's no cost, there's no fee. You just have to get there. And so all three of them were there for the entire day and got to do some interviews with them and, amongst several other people. But it was just remarkable for me, Marianne, because, often when you talk about Washington, D.C., people immediately think politics. And no matter
Mhm.
what side of the political spectrum you're on, it kind of gives you an aversion. I don't want to have anything to do with anything political, which I can appreciate. But this event, there's two U.S. Senators there, Senator McCormick, who's a Republican from Pennsylvania, and then Senator Gallego, who's a Democrat from Arizona. I got to interview both of those gentlemen individually because they spoke at different times of the day. And then I got to interview Congresswoman Brownley, who is just a fierce advocate from the 24th or 25th district in California. And what's significant about her specifically was she was the last speaker of the day. And she was also awarded as the Caregiver Supporter of the Year award by the foundation because she spearheaded something that's going to benefit caregivers in this country for years and years to come. And that was the passage of the Dole Act from 2024. And she's just done just such tremendous work. So they honored her. And then the highlight for me personally was getting to interview one of the only 64 living Medal of Honor recipients. It was Staff Sergeant First Class Petrie. He was injured in Afghanistan when he went to basically rescue his troops when a grenade came over the wall. And without hesitation, without thinking, he ran, picked it up, went to throw it back over, and unfortunately, the grenade had gone off in his hand
Mm.
before he was able to release it. And so, he's out there advocating for, caregivers, and, his story was just really hit home. And it talked about how, you know, you don't often think about these things when you're healthy, physically fit, and, no care in the world, so to speak. But then all of a sudden you have to learn how to use the bathroom again on your own. You have to learn how to wash yourself again on your own. But then your family comes in to help support that. And now they're a family caregiver for you. And it gives you a real firsthand perspective of what these caregivers go through and what they're living day in and day out. And then one of the other remarkable speakers was Secretary Collins. He's a secretary of the VA for the Trump administration. And again, this event, partisan, did not even get involved here. Partisan politics, no policy, no R versus D or what have you. It was all about supporting caregivers. And that's what I really appreciated about the event was politics were left at the door. These were just titles that these individuals carried into the door, but they didn't
Mhm.
play a part in it other than they can advocate at the highest levels of government for policy changes. And Secretary Collins said a story that really resonated with me as well. He was talking about, he has a daughter who was born with spina bifida and never knew that before this event. And he talks about how he still is a family caregiver and that has never left him. He was at a fast food restaurant waiting to get lunch or something. And he said, all of a sudden the alarm on the deep fryer went off. He said, and that alarm was almost the exact sound of what his daughter's alarms would make at home. And I don't want to put words in his mouth, but essentially he lost his appetite and he said, I have to go home and check on my daughter just by hearing that deep fryer alarm triggered at the restaurant. That's what family caregivers go through. And that's what the Elizabeth Dole Foundation is trying to do by all these initiatives. And they had breakout sessions that I'll talk about in a minute, but they're there to support family caregivers and our military veterans.
Mm. Sounds like a wonderful organization. And unfortunately, whether or not people want to be political or not, much of the resources that are available to caregivers do come from politics and from government resources. And right now, we're caught up in the new bill that is going to affect Medicaid, which for so many family caregivers is their lifeline. And there are going to be a lot of changes. There's going to be a lot of disruption
Right.
for people, and that's important. And that's why it's important to be involved in these things so that A, you know what's going on, and B, you can advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
So this sounds like a terrific organization, and
Could I add something to that real quick?
please do.
You're exactly right. And what really resonated with me was I spoke to the executive director of the Blue Star families, and that's for, veterans who were injured in war, not like the Gold Star who, lost their lives for the ultimate sacrifice. And, she came over from the public sector and took
Mhm.
over this role. And when we were interviewing her, I said, what's fascinating is here you are coming from the public sector into the government sector. I said, but if you look at this entire event, the whole body of the event and all of the different speakers, this is really where, public and private intersect and they unite. And whether you're RD, independent, undecided, we're all here for a common good. But it shows to me, Marianne, regardless of your political affiliation or leanings, that you can have people from vastly opposite polar ends of the political spectrum all find a common ground to unite on, which gave me great hope.
No, that's great. That's good to hear.
Yeah,
That's good to hear. So tell us about some of these breakout sessions that you mentioned.
absolutely. So, there was 4 breakout sessions throughout the day. We were filming and talking, so we didn't get to sit and benefit from them. Our friend Malika and her staff, they went to a couple of different ones, and we got a great interview with them talking about what they learned. But the 4 pillars of this convening for this year was The first one was strengthening emotional and mental well-being. The next
Mhm.
one was growing and sustaining economic mobility, which, that one really resonated with me as a family caregiver for my father in college. You're making minimum wage. I was doing student teaching, working in the labs, which I loved those jobs, but they weren't really something you're going to retire off of or pay a lot of bills on. Improving support and outcome for caregiving youth and families. That one really was helping to focus in on, they call them the hidden helpers. These family caregivers sometimes are children, and they had a
Mhm.
couple of, I don't want to call them children because they were adults now, but they had benefited from the hidden helpers program where they would come home from school and instead of being able to study or do homework, they're having to take care of mom or dad now because dad or mom, the other parent, is at work. And so they took on that role as a family caregiver as a young child, and they're often forgotten about. So they have this wonderful hidden helpers program. And the
Mhm.
other one was fostering supportive care ecosystems for caregivers and their loved ones and their veterans, which, if you don't get Medicare or maybe you don't qualify for Medicaid and there's going to be costs and expenses for, briefs, wipes, nutrition drinks, all these different things. And how do you support yourself? And as a family caregiver, you don't always have the flexibility to be able to take a 9 to 5 job or whatever it is at your local McDonald's or, grocery store just to earn some extra income to help pay these bills. Because if your loved one isn't able to work, maybe they were one of the breadwinners and contributing to the household, bills and things. So they're trying to give these caregivers ideas of ways that earn these micro jobs where you can do it conveniently from home or on the go but still maintain your role as that family caregiver.
Yeah, my mother's niece, who was her caregiver in the home and lived with her, she had a job where that was on all online.
Hmm.
So she would be, and it was the phone and the computer. So she would be making calls basically.
Right.
And she would do that like 4 hours a day. And so that really helped her because she didn't have to go anywhere and she was present there in the home and she could be interrupted if her attention was needed elsewhere. So there are opportunities for people
Absolutely.
to work at home, but it's very stressful trying to do that. And I think people want to be good, reliable employees. And if you are in a position where it's frowned upon for you to be late or for you to take the day off because of an emergency, and you're going to get fired. And then you become unemployable when you have spotty work history and you're, known to be unreliable. So
Absolutely.
that's a problem. I know I felt that way a lot myself, during different times. Like, can I fulfill the obligation of, showing up when I'm supposed to? I think that's the most important thing
Right. And
in
I know
an
there's
employee.
Well, and I know there's a big push, and this isn't related to the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, but that's something becoming more and more prevalent in conversations now, and that's having, caregiver friendly employers, where employers can be more understanding to what is going on with their employee when they have to miss work or they're an hour late because that doctor's appointment ran over or the doctor was running late. It's a very real thing because, you take a job, you want to do your best and you don't want to upset your employer. You don't want to risk losing your job. But when you're a family caregiver, there's often
Hmm.
things that are outside of your control.
That makes me think of a time when I was in case management. I was working on a cancer care unit, and there was a young guy there. He's like probably in his 40s, but he was dying,
Mm.
and his wife was in the room with him. She was there for a while, and then I went by, and she's like preparing to leave, and I said, "Oh, you're leaving. Where are you going?" And she says, "Well, I have to go to work." And I'm like, "You have to go to work? Your husband is dying. He's
Mm.
not going to be here later today. How are you going to work?" Thinking it to myself, and then I asked her. I said, "You do know that your husband is dying?" And she says, "Oh yeah, I know, but I can't miss work. They'll fire me."
Wow.
I said, "Well, where do you work?" So she told me she worked at one of the local nursing homes.
And of all people, right?
Exactly. And I was kind of like, wow. So she did. She left. Her husband passed away alone.
Wow.
And that was really sad. Stuck with me all these years. That was like 20 years ago. I still think about it. Kind of like that woman should not have had to make that decision.
No, no, well, I'll share one with you real quick. I used to work in cardiac critical care, and one of the patients we had, she was mid 50s, late 50s, and she was really there for, observation, and because she had came in with chest pain through the ER, and I went and I was doing her vitals, and, she was complaining she didn't feel well, had some chest pain.
Hmm.
So I let the charge nurse know, and charge nurse said, I'll be there. We're dealing with an acute situation right now. I go 2 rooms over, and her roommate, because oftentimes you're not benefited with a private room, unfortunately, is screaming. And so I run back in there, and she was deceased that quickly. The best guess by the attending physician that evening was that she threw a PE.
Hmm.
But the sad thing for me, Marianne, is she was waiting and waiting and waiting for, it must have been hours, that her daughter was coming in from New York because the
Hmm.
daughter was concerned, and her daughter didn't make it, and just that quickly, a PE went, and it's very fragile. I feel like, oftentimes people have a feeling, something's not right, like this woman. And I think her daughter probably thought so too, because she was flying in from New York and didn't make it. But that's always stuck with me, because 2 minutes ago I was talking to her, and just
Right.
that quick, you know,
Yeah. A PE is a pulmonary embolism.
I'm sorry. Yes, a pulmonary.
Yeah, just in case people were wondering, was
Yes.
a blood clot that goes
Yes.
into the lung. And yeah, it'll stop breathing. So
Yeah.
that's sad. Yeah. I mean, that happens a lot with people. People hang on, waiting for somebody to arrive, and sometimes they get there in time, sometimes they don't. It's really sad. But it's sad that people would have to make a choice that they had to put their job ahead of something like that. That happened to me actually with my father-in-law. I was a per diem worker. I was not to be mandated for
Mm,
overtime. But the nurse manager I was working that day mandated me to stay like beyond my shift. I had to stay till like 7 p.m. and I got off at 3 and I wanted to go down and visit my father-in-law. And it was the night before he died.
mm,
And I went down there. I knew that he wasn't going to live much longer. And I went and I was able to at least say, short goodbye. But I remember I was just like so angry that she took that away from me, and I wasn't supposed to be mandated. It was not part of my contract, but she insisted, made it very difficult for me. So even there, I'm in the hospital.
right. Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
think that person would have compassion.
Right.
That's like when I had my daughter when she was a baby and I was nursing her and I used to pump milk and I got floated into the mother baby unit
Mm.
and they were so annoyed with me because I had to pump milk.
I don't think that's legal anymore, though, is it?
No,
Yeah.
and it was my lunch break.
Yeah. In your
And I
lunch
went in
break.
the room and then I guess I took too long. And I said, well, I have to do this. I was using their machine too, because they had double pump, but it was kind of like that. We can cut this out of the story, but out of the podcast. But you would think that those people of all would be like tolerant if you
Yeah.
have to be tolerant of that.
I would wonder too if they would have been more tolerant if they had also experienced that. You know what I mean? If they had been a family caregiver at the nursing home, whoever her manager was, or, charge
Right.
nurse, if she'd have said, no, honey, you need to stay there, your
Yeah.
job's going to be here, tomorrow, you know, or, any other scenario. It's unfortunate. And I think as more people step into that role as a family caregiver, I think the more people are going to have compassion and understanding for it.
Yeah, you would hope. Some people have tunnel vision,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know. I mean, I can understand that because now they're in a bind. They need to find somebody to cover for this person. Now that person's going to get mandated,
Yeah.
the person they're supposed to relieve. But I think most people would be understanding if they knew, just don't walk out on something like that.
Right.
But
At least I would hope so.
I said, gee, if you have any other job, come here. I'll vouch for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because
And I
you're
know,
not somebody that's gonna, not irresponsible. I mean, to that point, but that was like sad. So back to the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. So you say that they support military veterans and their families and in caregiving in general. Is that right?
yes. Yes. So, the tagline for this year, and it was, as I mentioned, it's the 10th annual national convening. It's called A Blueprint for Action, Mapping the Future of Caregiving in a Changing World. So, they're talking about caregivers in general.
Mhm.
And, it was started by Senator Elizabeth Dole for her late husband, Senator Bob Dole, because he came home injured from World War II and just her experience at Walter Reed. And, she has just really picked up this man, and she was there as well. She's picked up this mantle and has just blazed trails. And, like I said, got laws passed into legislation, the Dole Act last year, which family caregivers as a whole are going to benefit for the foreseeable future from. They get it, they understand it, and uh, I had the fortunate benefit. They had scheduled two interviews with two of their new 2025 Dole Fellows, and one of the I mean, both of them are remarkable people, but the one woman I had interviewed was in her early mid 30s, Marianne, and she was actually a substitute because the one person was not able to do the interview. And so I didn't have the benefit of really knowing a whole lot about this woman's story. And I would just tell you, I mean, I like your story of that woman, with her husband in cancer. This one will probably stick with me forever as well. She has multiple children. She had a 10-month-old baby still. Her husband's in his early 40s or early 30s, and he didn't get injured in combat. He got injured though jumping from a helicopter doing, disaster training, and suffered a TBI. Didn't seek treatment for it right away, kind of, picked up his boots and moved on. And it was like not there long after they started noticing a lot more significant changes. And so they go to the doctor, and the doctor ran some tests and things. And as a result of that TBI from hitting his head or going out of the helicopter, it triggered a genetic change leading to early onset Alzheimer's.
Mm.
And now he requires 24-hour care. And they're in their 30s, and they have, I think, three, four children and a 10-month-old. And, as we're talking, she openly started crying, and, I'm trying to get her some Kleenex and stuff. And now she's out there leading the charge to support caregivers. But, that one day changed her entire life. And that's often the case. Like you and I spoke about earlier, you never know from minute to minute. Any one of us, our lives could be altered forever. And,
Right.
so the Elizabeth Dole Foundation is there to help support these caregivers because it's not an easy journey. It's very difficult. One of the other speakers, she was actually a Dole Fellow as well, but it was the first time they had a mother-daughter duo. Her mom previously was a Dole Fellow, and now the daughter is becoming a Dole Fellow. It's just remarkable, and the daughter who became a Dole Fellow when she was younger benefited from the Hidden Helpers program.
Wow. Great story.
Yeah. They're
Yeah.
just they're doing tremendous work. And it's one of those things. I know for me, when I first became a family caregiver for my father, even though I never identified as a family caregiver, I identified as a son just trying to help my dad out.
Right.
um, Nobody I talked to knew of resources. Nobody ever offered them. My dad had seven major surgeries while living with us, to the point where they had to remove part of his tailbone because of the osteomyelitis that developed as a result of his abscess breaking open. And but never once did anybody say, "Hey, have you looked into this organization? Have you looked into this? Here's some resources. Here's a brochure." And so, as a result of that experience of 2.5 years helping the care for my father, I'm like, there's got to be a way to get help. Maybe we should start a company where we send people into the homes to help people like us, never realizing, there's an entire industry out there, which there was, but I didn't know that because nobody ever told me. So, that's why we're passionate about what we're doing and, what you
Right.
guys are doing at All's Authors, so that there's another one of me out there who any day is going to become a family caregiver, and they're not going to have the first clue on what to do or where to go.
No, they don't. And they don't get the help that they need from the places they expect it.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, they need to do a little homework. So,
Yes.
it's like a family endeavor. And if there's somebody in your family or in your circle who's a really good person, at researching and getting information, that can be their job. Everybody needs to have a job.
Yes.
And sometimes that's the most important job. Because I know when I went looking I had to find a nursing home for my stepfather. I went to like 10 different places. I was driving all over the place over the course of like a couple of days.
Wow.
It would have been nice if somebody else had been able to go and help weed out the places that weren't going to work out for us. But I
Exactly.
remember doing all of that, and it's a lot, people don't realize everything that you have to do.
Right. Exactly. A good friend of ours who's also in DC, he didn't make this phrase, but I always credit him for saying it. It's like, you go in, it's diagnose and adios. You're getting a diagnosis. That's what you're getting. It's not much more than that, and I think that
Mm.
needs to change.
Yeah, well, people are stunned too. Like if you're going in and maybe you're not expecting a diagnosis. Maybe sometimes I think you might be, but when you hear those words, it's kind of like you get stuck there, and then the conversation continues, and then it's goodbye, and then you're still stuck on the fact that, oh, I have this now,
Yeah,
and you miss the whole thing.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, that's always a good idea to have somebody else with you
Right.
if you're
Yes.
thinking you're going to get bad news. Yeah. So, what other resources does the Elizabeth Dole Foundation offer to caregivers?
Yeah. Well, I encourage people go to their website,
Hmm.
elizabethdolefoundation.org, and check out the Hidden Heroes program, Hidden Helpers. Lots of good information. They love partnering with other organizations. When we were there was maybe 25, 30 different vendors. I know
Hmm.
we interviewed the executive director of communications for the VA's caregiver support program. I will gladly admit I'd never heard of that program. We work with the VA for families that we service through their aid and attendance program, but that's not something that's openly available to everyone. There's qualifications. But this program, they call it basically the VA has been supporting our veterans forever. Now this is a way for us to support those who are supporting our veterans. So I encourage people, if you have a loved one that's military or was military, they're a veteran, and you're caring for them, check out the VA's caregiver support program. It's a wonderful, tremendous resource that, again, admittedly, in 15 plus years, I did not ever hear of. And so I was very excited to learn about that.
And what was that called again?
The VA caregiver support program.
Okay, definitely check that out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's remarkable. And, they had other resources. A lot of people have probably heard of Wounded Warriors. They had
Hmm.
a canine program if you needed a dog, a helper dog, just endless different things.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Sounds fantastic.
Yeah. It's definitely an event that I am looking forward to going to again next year. Hopefully we'll be invited to attend in the capacity to record and cover it. But I would probably attend regardless just because they're doing some really, really amazing work there, and they're just really trying to bring caregivers and support for our veterans and support for caregivers to the forefront of the discussion.
Yeah, I would like to attend that myself, so maybe I'll
Yeah.
see you there.
Well, if you go, we'll interview you.
Okay. Now, are your interviews available on your podcast site?
Yeah, yeah. We have two big ones. The second one was our post-convening wrap-up. It's about an hour and 40 some minutes. We had the chief operating officer on, Elizabeth Field, where we kind of did a look back of the event, and then we put all of our interviews into that video. It's just magnificently done. Then we had the pre-convening interview with her as well, and then all of the individual interviews are available also.
Oh, that's great. So, listeners, you might want to check that out. We'll put the links to it in the show notes so you can find it easily. I want to talk a little bit about the book that you wrote,
Yeah.
the Home Care Matters Official Family Caregiver Guide. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so they came out in March of last year. It's something, I will say we don't probably promote or market as much as we should, but it wasn't really done with the, vision of being, a bestseller or, for revenue. It was really written more for me personally. I wanted something that I wish I would have had, like we had talked about when I first became that caregiver for my father, and nobody was giving me anything. And a good friend of ours, Lori LeBay, wrote the foreword to the book, which I'm very grateful and appreciative of. And she calls it a map. And when she explained the reason she called it a map, I said, that makes total sense. It's basically a GPS for your caregiving journey. If
Mhm,
you were coming out to, visit with you in New York, Marianne, I would need a map to start out of my driveway, right?
mhm,
But
mhm.
even though I get halfway there, it doesn't mean I don't need that map anymore. I need
Right.
it until I pull into your driveway. Well, that's what this book is. No matter where you're at on that caregiving journey, whether you first step out the door and you're a caregiver or you've been caregiving for a couple of years for your loved one, there's still going to be things that arise that you may not be aware of or are unsure of. So we have great references in the back, talking about advanced directives, living wills, what DNRs are, and things like that. But there's also a lot of good, helpful self-care, practical tips in there as well for people because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of your loved one.
That's right. That is right. So I encourage everyone to take a look at the book. Where can they find it?
You can find it on Amazon, Target, Walmart, really any of your online retailers, or you can go to allhomecarematters.com or lanceaslatton.com and get it there as well.
Okay, that sounds great. And lastly, tell us about some of the highlights about the podcast. Like, how long have you had the podcast? I know you've won some awards.
Yeah.
You can take this time to brag.
Well, that's something I'm not very good at.
No.
So the show started in May of 2020, so we just celebrated our 5-year anniversary. When we started it, it was never intended to be a long-term thing. We really started it as a substitute for all of our community education events and our support groups that we do throughout Michigan during the beginning days of the pandemic. Little did we know, and like most others, that the pandemic was going to turn into 2.5, maybe 3 years for some. And so it really gave us a lot of time to spend with the podcast and, devote more time to it and planning and strategy. And yeah, so late 2023, we were contacted by Google/YouTube that they're going to honor us with the Silver Creator Award, which I didn't even know that was a thing. Thankfully, my video guy knew what that was, and he was more excited than I was because he said it's quite a big honor. And we're very active with the Academy of Interactive Visual Arts, which is one of the main academies for like online media. So podcasts, websites, videos, things like that. And
Mhm.
we've been fortunate the last couple of years to, win some awards from them as well as the W3 awards. And, we're doing what we love. And that's just trying to get information out to help people and support them on this journey. Because as we've talked throughout this, podcast, families don't know what they don't know. And they,
Mhm.
and I say that very intently because there's a lot they need to know, right?
Right.
Because it can be a very scary, scary time and it can affect every aspect of your life. You and I've talked today off camera about what happens when caregiving ends. People lose their identity. They feel like they've been frozen in time. They lose jobs, skills, friends, relationships.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, you can lose everything. And I know families that we help where a family member literally did lose everything. They went into foreclosure, bankruptcy, the whole nine. And it's because they were so tunnel visioned and focused on what they had to do for their loved one. They
mhm.
sacrificed everything they had to do for themselves. And that's not the way to do it either, because you have to be, as you have to be the best version of yourself in order to give your loved one the best care they can receive from you.
Exactly. That's great. And where is the podcast found?
You can go to allhomecarematters.com or YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, X, LinkedIn. Just type in All Home Care Matters and it should come right
Mhm.
up for you. But I also want to say if there's people out there that want to share their story, tell their story, or help support family caregivers, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to meet with you and see if, it'd be a good episode to create.
Sounds terrific. Thank you so much, Lance. Great to see you again.
Always a pleasure, Marianne. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.